Okay. Hopefully you can all hear me. You guys on Facebook, hello. How are you? Yeah, I thought about doing this one live, but then I thought, no, I'll do a little recording and I'll insert slides of the things I'm going to talk about. Yes, welcome everybody to who follows me on Facebook. I don't think I'll upload this to YouTube. I think well, if you're watching it on YouTube, I chose to in the end. I might change my mind. You know what I'm like. Anyway, yes, it's a wonderful day here today. It's actually my birthday today. William Shatner's gone into space, which is quite appropriate considering what I'm going to talk about today. Yes, the Big Brother Orwellian pandemic hellhole continues. Remember, sickness is health. Lockdown is freedom. Immune deficiency is strength. Yes. So, okay, what happened was my proud and dignified brother Porter, who I will not name, but he did turn up at our little our post St Theo's reunion the other day. Asked me he gave me a list of things. He said, I want you to tell me. He said, do a little video, which I'm doing now. And he said, I want to give a list of the three scariest films you've ever seen, and the 3 best romantic comedies you've ever seen. And he said also about books, which was the most scariest books. I haven't had to think. The books is a tricky one. The films I've had to think about for a bit, but I've got a list of 3 what I consider the scariest films, plus a 4th one, which I think is very important, which I'll talk about, and also my 3 favourite romantic comedies. Okay, now the answers. I'll go on to the scariest films I've ever seen first of all. Now the answers might surprise you. They are not the films you'll expect to hear. But when it comes to scary films, the definition of what's the scariest film, I think it's fair enough to say, well, how do you define that? Would you say which film scared you the most, caused you the most fear? And the answer's it's not the films do that for most people. I think it's important to bear in mind that the films I'm going to list, right, the number 1 and 2 of this list of scariest films, I saw when I was very young. And if I saw them today for the first time, they probably wouldn't have that same effect on me. However, the question was, what's the films that scared you the most? This is my answers. The scariest film I've ever seen is Star Trek the Motion Picture. Yep, PG certificate and everything and all that sort of thing. Yes, the first Star Trek movie. I know I think it's less popular with die-hard Trekkies than most of the other films. I know it's had mixed reviews and things like that. It is the first big screen adventure for Star Trek. That terrified me when I was a child. I was very young when I saw it. I can't remember did I see it at the cinema or did I watch it on TV? I can't remember. The thing about the film is, because I think I've been a big Star Trek fan ever since I can remember. I remember being like preschool and watching it and thinking it was great. The reason Star Trek the Motion Picture is so frightening is there's a couple of quite alarming scenes which I think would fit more in sci-fi horror than in Star Trek. They're a bit too extreme for Star Trek. One is a scene near the beginning in which 2 people are killed when the transporter malfunctions. It's extremely well done. I mean, the special effects and the production design and the sound effects are fantastic. It's very similar to The Fly, which is about a experiment with a transporter-like device, and it would fit very well into that film. It would fit very well into Alien or one of these other specialist sci-fi horrors. But for Star Trek, I think it's a bit over the top. You can find the scene on YouTube. It's a Star Trek the Motion Picture transporter malfunction. And all the comments underneath agree with me. They say, this really freaked me out. This is really horrible. What happens is basically they try to beam these people up. Something goes wrong with the transporter. And whatever happens, however the transporter works, I think it turns matter into energy, then reassembles as matter. Something goes wrong, and they end up losing the signal, and I don't know whether half the matter doesn't get reassembled, or the matter gets reassembled in the wrong place. Either way, it's that the people are killed. Their people are obviously, they turn up and they sort of half materialise on the Enterprise and then they disappear again, and then someone on the ground says, Enterprise, what we got back didn't live long, fortunately. Presumably they came back all messed up in some way, biologically or physically, because of what happened, and then they died. Um, as I said, this is a bit over the top for Star Trek, I would say, considering especially it had like the audience is aimed at a family audience. As I said, judging by the YouTube comments, I wasn't the only child who was seriously affected by this. I must say that one scene prevented me from enjoying the rest of the film. It haunted me for the entire rest of that movie, and it stopped me enjoying it. There's the other Star Trek movies are pretty good actually. I mean, like the Wrath of Khan, for example, is excellent. The Search for Spock, and then it goes downhill actually with the. I'm a you know I'm a I don't mind the TNG series, but the Next Generation movies weren't very good. As for the woke ones, don't get me started on that. But that is the most frightening film I've ever seen. The second most frightening film I've ever seen, and again, you will laugh, but it's actually Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Again, I was very young when I first saw this. I can't remember if it was the cinema or TV. The end scene. I mean, it's not a bad film actually. I mean, it's had its critics. I mean, people say things like, Indiana Jones doesn't do very much. He's not really a big part of the plot. He's just sort of an observer. I enjoyed the film. It was a great movie. I thought it was very, very good. And today I can actually, I can't really watch Star Trek the Motion Picture. Still, I can't really get into. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, I can. But the ending is pretty scary because the Ark of the Covenant, of course, is this. It's actually a box which is mentioned in the Bible. It contained the stone slabs in which God wrote the Ten Commandments and gave them to Moses, who put them in a box, and they carried them wherever they went. The Israelites, and they were 40 years in the wilderness, and they always carried this box with them, and it protected them because it was a embodiment of God's grace. What happens is the Germans in World War II get a hold, or it was before World War II, the Nazis get hold of it. They try to turn it into their own weapon, but of course it turns on them and kills them, and it kills them in the most gruesome way imaginable. They're literally the two bad guys they almost melt away or dissolve in front of the screen. It's very, very graphic indeed, very graphic. And that, again, was extremely disturbing for me as a child. That was the second scariest film I've ever seen. Because it came at the end, it didn't stop me enjoying the rest of the movie. I think because with the Star Trek example, it's actually in the beginning of the film that this happens. In the terms of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's actually the climax of the movie where this happens. Now, the third scariest film I've seen is probably one you've never heard of. Now, you'll be glad to know this is one I saw as a kid. This is one I saw as an adult, but I found it very frightening. It's actually not. It's a rather obscure B movie actually called The Devil's Pass. It's quite a low budget film, but very, very good special effects for its budget. It's terrifying. The reason I watched it. It's because it's about a true story. It's based on a true story. The film itself, luckily, is not true, but the background to it is a real event that happened in 1959 in Russia. What happened was a group of young winter hikers were out on a trip in the Ural Mountains near a place known as the Dyatlov Pass, and they die. They disappear when the searchers go and find the bodies. The bodies are like lying all over the place. No one knows exactly what happened to them. Some of them have weird injuries, a bit like the cattle mutilation thing. And being into UFOs and conspiracies and paranormal stuff, I've always taken an interest in this tragedy. And the Devil's Pass is set in the present day, but it's about a group of teenagers. It is a bit of a teeny horror movie, actually. There's a bit of love interest and things like that. They go and investigate the Devil's Pass. They retrace the steps of the hikers from 1959, and all kinds of horrible things happen to them, and it's really disturbing. Actually, it involves things such as time travel and portals and mutations and things. It's really, really frightening. I should point out that I should actually point out to you that there is a fourth film I want to mention, and I wouldn't say it's scary. It's not scary as such, but it's just extremely upsetting. It's film I saw as a child, which I found enormously traumatic. It didn't frighten me, but it upset me. I found it heartrending and really, really unpleasant in not frightening, but just it's called Orca the Killer Whale. It's actually a film from 1977, and it's a kind. It came out 2 years after Jaws, and it's kind of a cheap imitation of Jaws. It's an attempt really to copy Jaws, but there's a killer whale instead of a shark. Again, it's not on those lists of things that most people dislike, but I personally found it very, very upsetting. I was a small child when I saw this, and I didn't watch it to the end. After half an hour, my parents switched it off and sent me to bed because I was crying and crying and crying. It's the thing is, there's some really extreme scenes of animal cruelty in it, and that's what upset me. I mean, because you see, I mean, I don't like cruelty to animals, and I've got a particular soft spot actually for marine mammals of the whale and dolphin variety, cetaceans. Though I do have a particular soft spot for those kinds of animals, and I can't bear to think about whaling and things like that. I just find that completely unbearable to even contemplate. And this film is full of very, very graphic and extreme animal cruelty towards the killer whales. It's very upsetting indeed. I only saw half an hour of it. Like I said, I was a little kid. I went to bed. I'm not going to watch the. I'm not going to ever. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I'll never watch the rest of it. I'll never see it again. Let's come on to the romantic comedies because it's a bit more happy, isn't it? Okay. My favourite romantic comedy I've ever seen, the best one ever, is actually, again, it's not a famous one. It's not your Four Weddings and a Funeral or Notting Hill and all the big screen blockbusters. It's none of those. It's called Lovesick. It's from the 70s, and it stars Alec Guinness and Dudley Moore, and it is brilliant. It's Dudley Moore plays this. He's actually a psychoanalyst, and he gets involved with one of his patients, and it's very sweet. It's funny and it's romantic, hence romantic comedy. What makes it brilliant is Alec Guinness, because Alec Guinness comes into it as not like a ghost. It's like it's almost like an embodiment of the main character, his own. Because he's a psychoanalyst, he looks up to Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is kind of the father of psychoanalysis, and I don't think he was a very good. I don't think he was a very good guy. I think his work, whatever he was like, his discoveries have been weaponized. But the point is, Alec Guinness plays him, and he keeps appearing in this guy's life, almost like he's like his inner Freud projected, and it's very good. Without Alec Guinness and that character and that concept within the film, it wouldn't be half as good. It'd be pretty bland, actually. That's the best romantic comedy I've ever seen. The second best romantic comedy is also one which is not very well known. It's one which has a distinct difference because there's a paranormal element to this, a supernatural element to it. It's called Sliding Doors. Gwyneth Paltrow plays this woman who, again, she's with Mr. Wrong. She meets Mr. Right. All things happen with Mr. Wrong. Eventually, she ends up with Mr. Right. It's a classic romantic comedy plot, rather cliche, actually. What makes it interesting is that she ends up living two lives because she goes through a situation where there's a bifurcation in her timeline, and she ends up in She ends up basically in two parallel universes, and the plot covers both of those parallel universes. Brilliant idea. It's a fantastically original idea, and like I said, it turns what would otherwise be a rather pat and hackneyed romantic comedy into something extraordinary. The director's Peter Howard. He's not very well known. He was actually a sort of sitcom actor, theatre stage actor in the 80s, and he did a couple of sitcoms. And he went into direction, and this is one of his direction. This is one of his masterpieces, I would say. My third favourite romantic comedy is called Tutsi. again, it's quite well known. It's quite famous bits from the 70s. I think the older ones were better. Dustin Hoffman plays a guy who, again, he's a lonely singleton looking for love, and he has never really managed to get a proper relationship. He's sort of approaching middle age. He's about 40. Never had a real woman in his life. Wants that badly. Doesn't really know how to make a relationship, and he eventually does find love, but he finds it in the most extraordinary way. He's an actor, you see, and he decides to take on a female role in a TV series by pretending to be a woman. So he dresses up as a woman. He goes along to the audition. He gets the role of playing a woman. He becomes enormously successful. He becomes a massive international celebrity as this actress. And in doing so, he falls in love with one of his fellow actresses, and it's a bit awkward because she thinks he's a woman, and he has to pretend to be a woman. But there's an amazing dialogue, really great script, really very well scripted, and great storyline about how they end up together. That's my third favourite romantic comedy. So I hope that answers your question, Brother Porter. You want me to do books? I'll have to think about the books more carefully. All right, but this is my answer to your question that you asked on St Theo's night, or the belated St Theo's night, and I hope you like it. And I hope everyone else watching this on Facebook likes it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, as I will probably change my mind and upload it there, I hope you like it too. So, pride and dignity, all my hospital porters out there. And anyone else watching, well, nobody's perfect, if you're not a hospital porter. That's all. So, see you next time. I'll see you next time, probably on Facebook, when I talk about the books question. Okay, guys, I'm recording. Hopefully, it should fit in. Excuse my appearance. As always, I haven't dressed up for this particular video, but there you go. That's it. I come as you are sort of situation. I'm not wearing my hat today because this is a kind of continuation of a video that I uploaded to Facebook, and I said that would be a Facebook exclusive, but of course then I thought, why don't I put it on YouTube? When I thought about putting it on YouTube, because really I feel a bit bad because I haven't done anything for a week on YouTube, so I'm falling a bit behind, I think. I don't like to leave too much of a gap between videos. And I thought, why don't I do a bit of an addendum about black comedies, or, as they're known today, ethnic minority comedies. Actually, I do want to add a little bit, first of all, to my scariest movies collection. Now, my brother Porter, who gave me this assignment, did specifically say movies. He didn't include TV series. There is actually several TV horror series. There are several TV series which include horror or horror elements. The X-Files, for example, many of the episodes have horror elements to them. Now, when I was a kid, there was this thing on TV called the Hammer House of Horror, and it was a series of short films. I think they were only about 3/4 of an hour to an hour long. And some of them are pretty frightening. And unlike the Star Trek one and Indiana Jones, if they're the sort of films that scare me if I watch them today. There's one in particular is far more frightening than all the others, and it's called The Two Faces of Evil. And you've probably seen it. There's clips of it on YouTube. Probably the whole thing is floating around somewhere. I once found the whole thing on YouTube. Family driving along a car, a mum and dad and the two kids. It's a cold and stormy night, and suddenly a hitchhiker appears at the side of the road, dressed in a long yellow raincoat and sou'wester, holding out his thumb like that. And yeah, it's really terrifying. Actually, it's that's not a movie; it's a TV program. It's a TV film, and sub feature length. But that scared me enormously. Now, black comedies. Well, what are black comedies? Well, black comedy is it's a sort of sometimes called gallows humour. It's jokes about things that are not normally funny and sometimes quite horrible, making fun of things that are quite horrible. My background in healthcare given me an appreciation for that. As you know, doctors, if you've ever known any doctors well, you'll know that they have a very ghoulish sense of humour. It's nothing personal, it's just the only way they can survive to do the job, basically. But there was now, black comedies tend to be like TV series. I mean, more than movies. The most famous, for example, I won't go into TV series here. There are a couple of quite good TV series black comedies. The most famous is probably MASH. This is a long-running TV series, which I think started it was in the 60s and 70s, I think, about a group of doctors and nurses and other staff at a military field hospital in the Korean War, and it was very popular. So MASH is probably the best known. There are others. Now, I won't mention them on this particular video because I can do an entire video about them, and indeed I've done articles about them on Hapanwo Voice, and that is Utopia. Both the versions. There's the original Channel 4 one that I think came out in 2011. It's quite old now, and the more recent Amazon one, which I think came out in 2019 or 2020. Ironically, just before the old C word struck. They're very good. They're very good TV series. A lot of black humour in them. The original Channel 4 one is better, and it is also more of a black comedy, I'd say, than the Amazon one. Both, though, I think I would call black comedies. Now, my favourite black comedy movie is called Severance. Now, this is not a very well-known film. Actually, it's not that famous. A lot of the things I do like are not very famous. I mean, among my romantic comedies, the only romantic comedy I thought was one of my favourites, which was really famous, was Tutsi. And in the case of my list of black comedies, so I said romantic comedies. My favourite in my list of romantic comedies was Tutsi. In terms of black comedies, there's only one in my top three I would say is particularly famous. Now, Severance is a film, but it stars Danny Dyer, incidentally, he made a documentary about UFOs, which is quite good, unlike most of them. And Danny Dyer is what it is. It's the tagline on the posters is another bloody office outing, and it is about a group of people who are really. Some of them are really funny, and some of them are quite eccentric. And there's the very bureaucratic boss played by Tim McInerney, and they're sort of they're office types, they're admin type people. But their job is in a defense firm. They work in the military industrial complex for an arms manufacturer, and they design deadly devices of war, the most terrible weapons of war they can find. And they sit in their office designing these things. But these are not military type people. They never have to use them or face them in battle. But they design them for militaries across the world. And I mean, there's many real life scenarios like this. So what happens is, though, they go out on an office outing, as you suggest, and they go out on a little, what's it called, a team building effort. They go and they play paintball, of course, in the dark woods. The problem is that the location they choose is in a very remote area of Eastern Europe. Near the border. At one time they're wondering even where are they in Romania or Serbia? Where's the border? That sort of thing. They're in these dark forests in the mountains, and it just happens to be that also living in these dark forests are some renegades from the Bosnian War. And if you remember that, what happened in the 90s, what used to be Yugoslavia broke down in an orgy of violence. I mean, when the Soviet Union fell and the socialist regimes across the world followed it, some of them did so peacefully. There was just like in Czechoslovakia and Poland, there was a peaceful handover of power. In others, it wasn't so peaceful, and in Yugoslavia, when that broke up, it did so with some of the worst atrocities that basically Europe has ever seen. And not all the people who did it were captured. But what's funny is that they then find themselves being hunted by these vicious, brutal sort of ex-terrorist type people from Serbia who are using the weapons that they manufacture. They're actually customers of theirs. And for the first time ever, they now have to see they essentially experience the results of their own industry. And that's the sweet and horrible irony of the whole situation. But it's incredibly, you see, it's the first act of the first act of the film in particular is really good. I generally don't watch the second half; it's not so good. Once I've seen it once, that's all you need to see. You only need to see it once, really. But it's very violent and quite horrible, but it's hilarious. I was laughing my ass off. I really was. My second favourite black comedy is called The 51st State. Now this is not very well known. I think it deserves to be more famous than it is. It was it's funny because it's about a group of gangsters in Liverpool, and the film essentially takes the mickey out of Liverpudlians quite badly. Robert Carlyle plays their leader, but there's a whole load of others. There's a few well-known actors, Sean Pertwee, people like that. The guy who was in the royal family, whose name I can't remember, the old big Liverpudlian guy, I can't remember his name. And they're joined from an American comes over, Samuel L. Jackson, he's a chemist who was basically kicked out of university for using drugs, and so he puts his talents to the criminal scene because he can't get a proper job, and he creates drugs and things, lots of other things. It's really, really, again, very, very violent film. Lots of scenes of quite imaginative scenes of cruelty, but it's just so funny. Rhys Evans is in it as well, as this sort of wise talking drug dealer. It's a laugh a minute, it really is. I watched that all the way through. And as I say, it takes the mickey out of Liverpudlians quite badly. A lot of the jokes are about, there's lots of jokes about terminology between English and American words, My third favourite black comedy is called Starship Troopers. This is hilarious. It's a spoof, actually, of a famous science fiction book, which I've reviewed, actually. I reviewed it after Sargon of Akkad did 2 reviews of that. Or I think he did one. He's done several. It was quite a controversial book when it came out because it's about a world government. It's about a future scenario where there's a world government. It's set several centuries in the future. It's written by Robert Heinlein, who I've read 5 of his books, actually. And when I read Starship Troopers, I was surprised. This one's different than all the other books he's written. I couldn't believe it was the same person, and it could be because I generally the other books I read were during his later period in the 80s when he wrote his last books. This was in like 1959. Its tagline is "Service guarantees citizenship," and Sargon of Akkad uses that. But it's about a world government which has a society based on the Roman Republic, where you have the people who've done military service who gain citizenship and those who don't. And so there's a double strata society, and the details of the Space Marines, as they call them, the mobile infantry, and it's all very very detailed, probably based on Heinlein's own military experience. Because the main character, who comes from what is today Argentina. But there's no different. There's like a one world government there. He goes through all the training, and the training's described in great detail. And he goes off to fight these evil aliens. The film is it's not just an adaptation; it's a spoof of the original book. Because it's exaggerated, it exaggerates the entire. It's sort of, in a sense, it's satirical against satirical of the kind of society that is portrayed in the book. I I wrote 2 reviews of it actually on Her Panama Voice. I have mixed feelings about the politics of the whole thing. I do. I'm not against it. I'm not anti it, but at the same time I'm not pro either. It has many flaws in it, but I'm not anti in the sense I think it's fascism. Because a lot of people accuse Robert Heinlein of promoting fascism with Starship Troopers. I don't think that's fair at all. So that was actually quite a good black comedy, I thought. And that is quite well known. That's become quite famous. It's by Paul Verhoeven, who is he's a Dutch director actually, who went over and became very big in Hollywood. He created RoboCop, and the original Total Recall was Arnold Schwarzenegger, which again they have that kind of black comedy element to them too, I think. But with Starship Troopers, it's more pronounced. It's primarily meant to be funny. And so those are my favourite black comedies. And that's the end of this particular video. So that's a little bit of an addendum there. So for my brother Porter, I hope hope that suited you. I hope you enjoyed that. And for everyone else who's not a Porter, well, hope you did too. And I'll be back with another video soon. I've actually there's one I want to make in a couple of days, actually, which I think you'll find interesting. And I've uploaded a gaming stream from Twitch I did onto BitChute and Odyssey. Now I don't normally advertise them on Panama TV because I like to keep the 2 things separate, because my gaming streams, I've only done a few of them, and they tend to be just pretty apolitical. They're about the game itself. But this one's different because I discuss USOs in it, so just pop over and check that out if you get a chance. In the meantime, thank you all of you for watching, and this is another answer to the question posed to me by my brother Porter at our belated St Theo's Day reunion. Pride and dignity, brother Porter. And all for the rest of you, Hospital Porter's pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. And I hope you don't mind me mixing my metaphors. See you again soon.